Hey everyone, welcome back to the Law of Attraction Tribe podcast. So, for those of you who have listened to the podcast since the beginning, you know that I first learned about the Law of Attraction from The Secret. And that was really the thing that changed my perception and led me on this path of doing everything I'm doing today, including this podcast. And today's guest was in The Secret. So I really feel like it's just a full circle moment and a special episode. Our guest is a world renowned human behavior specialist, chiropractor, best selling author of 43 books, and one of the most cited voices in integrative health today. Over nearly 5 decades of research and clinical practice, he has developed a comprehensive science backed framework exploring the psychological and emotional drivers behind almost 1,000 diseases and health conditions. Dr. John Demartini, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I know today we're going to dive into health and how mindset and emotional drivers play a role. But before we do that, I'm just curious if you could explain what led you down this remarkable journey that you've been on of helping millions of people. You've been in some of the most well-known documentaries, writing 43 books. Was there a defining moment in your life that sort of shifted you onto this path?
17 years old, North Shore of Oahu, long-haired hippie surfer, nearly died surfing Laniakea, big waves. In recovery, I was led to a health food store, which led me to a yoga class where Paul C. Bragg was speaking. And one night, in 1 hour, he inspired me to believe that I could overcome my learning challenges. I had a speech impediment, learning challenges, didn't read till I was 18. And I also had a health issue because of what had led me to nearly die. So that started me on the exploration of wellness, well-being. I eventually took a GED, high school equivalency. I dropped out of school when I was young and miraculously passed that by guessing. I don't know how that happened. Tried to go back to school, failed, almost gave up on the idea that I would someday become intelligent. My mom found me curled up in a fetal position in the living room floor, really distraught because I got a 27 on a test. I needed a 72 to pass. And she said to me, whether you go back, whether you go on and overcome this challenge and become a great teacher and travel the world like you dream, or whether you go back and ride big waves as a surfer or return to the streets and panhandle as a bum, which I did. I was a street kid for a while. Just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what. And when she said that, I had this really meaningful moment of determination. My hand went into a fist, and I said, I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching, healing, and philosophy. And I'm going to do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance, pay whatever price to give my service of love across the planet. And I went on and hugged my mom. I said, I'm not going to let anything stop me, not even myself. And I went out and got a dictionary, and I started memorizing 30 words a day, pronouncing them, spelling them, putting them in a sentence, practicing speaking them. My mom tested me on the 30 words a day, and I grew my vocabulary 20,000 words in 2 years, and went from the bottom of the class to the top. And people started asking me questions, and I started teaching before I was 18 at the time. And that led on to University of Houston, where I started teaching every day, professional school, 10 years of college almost. And I never stopped teaching. And my dream was to travel to every country. And I've gotten to speak in 174 countries now, but all about mind, body, and healing and maximizing human potential. That's been my dream. I wanted to master my life and help myself and other people overcome their challenges. And I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing. I do it every single day of my life. I'm right now in British Columbia in Haida Gual, which is an Indian reservation in British Columbia on my ship. I just sailed in this morning and I'm just traveling the world, doing podcasts, doing webinars, doing seminars, and researching every day. Just research and write every day.
Oh, that's incredible. I know your team said that you were living on a boat, and I was curious where you were adventuring to right now. How inspiring. I feel like every child should hear that story. I mean, to not be reading until you're 18 and then to go on and write 43 books and just do everything that you've done, it's remarkable. And thank you for sharing that. So I do want to get into talking about health. I've done some episodes recently on the podcast where, we kind of talk about healthcare or like sick care, as some people say, just because we're sort of gotten to this place in society where I feel like we're, immediately prescribed drugs to mask the symptoms of just about any health issue. But from what I understand, you dive a lot deeper into the drivers of these conditions. And so maybe we can start there and you can talk about the emotional drivers that are behind a lot of these health issues and what we can do about that.
I'd love to. Right now, editing on a textbook I'm writing on the origins of stress and cancer, the psychological stress and cancer. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I've about to present starting tomorrow a 5-day program on 1,000 health conditions and the psychophysiology and psychoneurology and psychoimmunology of these things. So I'm very fascinated by that. We have um, each of us have a set of values, a set of priorities we live by our life by. And it's fingerprint specific, it's unique to us. It's based on all the voids, judgments, and incomplete awarenesses that we've had from the time we were conceived till now. And it dictates how we perceive, decide, and act. And anything that we perceive supportive to those values activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest side, and creates an impulse to seek, like a prey, food. We want to consume it. Anything that challenges that set of values, we create the sympathetic side, the fight or flight response, to avoid it. So we either have a seeking impulse or an avoidance instinct. Each of these affect our transmitters, modulators, hormones, and signal molecules at the cell tissue and organ level. So our physiology is responding to our psychology. For instance, if we perceive something challenging and we resent somebody, for instance, we have a chronic resentment and they keep aggravating in our perceptions, that chronic sympathetic stimulus will create adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, and that will raise the heart rate, so tachycardia. It'll raise the blood pressure, hypertension. It'll raise glucagon, raise blood sugar, and lower insulin. So if we have a chronic perception of challenge that we can't seem to escape, and we keep not getting what we want, and it threatens us, we can perpetuate an increase in lipids, an increase in platelets, because sympathetic makes platelets increase. It can suppress the immune system and add Treg cells, and that not the surveillance of natural killer cells go down. These are not random. These are very, very specific physiological, immunological, cellular responses to perceptions. So what I've done is I taught neurology in my 20s, and I've been fascinated by neuroscience and the immune system. I taught embryology also. And what I've done is I've traced all the cells, the cell receptors, the signal molecules, which are close paracrine or endocrine distant, and how they respond, the epigenetic impact that each of those responses are associated with, and how it affects inside the cell in the genes, the intracellular organelles, the cell responses, the enzyme pathways. I've mapped these things out very clearly. And we're not taught applied physiology. We're not given a chance to realize our potential to transform our physiology by transforming our perceptions. Our ratios of perceptions and the emotions that come from that are stored as a result of the amygdala assigning a valency to our perceptions, our stimulus. And we're storing that in our hippocampus as in our subconscious mind, as some people call it. And these things reverberate and take up space and time in our mind because of that storage and cause insomnia, cause eating disorders. If we perceive that we can't get what we want, or we perceive that we can't avoid what we don't want, we increase ghrelin or leptin and overeat or undereat as a result of the perceptions of the fear of loss of something we're seeking or the fear of gain we're trying to avoid. So our stress responses show up in our eating patterns, our perceptual patterns, our anxieties or ecstasy patterns, how we seek and avoid, and how we let external circumstances impact our physiology. And our training is because most people are not educated in that, most people don't know their power, aren't given the education to do that, which is what I'm more interested in. They just go for immediate gratification. And just like an investment, immediate gratification costs you, long term deferred gratification pays. And people don't realize that the symptoms they have are not necessarily your enemies. They're actually trying to educate you on how to be authentic, how to see things from a balanced objective, how to appreciate life and love life. So the symptoms are suppressed or repressed, um, consciously or unconsciously, and palliatively taken care of by a pharmaceutical approach, which is a commercial intention, not necessarily an educational intention, and preventive intention. And that's not a bad thing. I don't want to label it bad because if people aren't going to be empowered, they're going to be overpowered. If they're not going to take command, they're going to end up depending on that. That's not my first choice. I'd rather educate people and give them their power back because I really believe that the power that made the body, that has the wisdom of the body, as as Walter Cannon said in his book, The Wisdom of the Body, and its homeostatic capacity, we're not trained on how to maximize it. I really think an ounce, of prevention is greater than a pound of cure, as the old saying goes. So that's what I do. I try my best to anything that allows people to maximize their awareness and potential and assist themselves in reaching their objectives in life so they have fulfillment in life. And I really believe that the body responds to how congruent you are in your values, your highest values, and how well you learn how to see what's actually there, not what's just realized there because of the injected uh, values and moral hypocrisies and traditionals and norms and conformities that we get trapped in our life. So, I could go for hours on this stuff.
Oh, I feel like there's so many things I want to dive into. I mean, one thing that I've noticed just in my own life is how we're very conditioned, especially through um, schooling, or at least I feel like I was to look at stress as kind of like a necessity for success, and that you're not really taught to follow your intuition or your passion and do what fulfills you. You're taught like, get this job, get with benefits and a 401k, and you're just kind of told what to do, or at least my generation, that's what happened. And over and over and over again in life, when I was stressed to the point that I was having panic attacks, and um, you know, the doctor just wanted to give me a prescription medication to mask the anxiety. Everyone would just say, "Well, that's life. It's stressful. Everyone hates their job. Every job is stressful. You just deal with it, and you have to because that's how you get to the next promotion or whatever." And I feel like this is so common. It's a common story. And we really have to sort of go way back and break up that conditioning and think that, is this even what I believe, or is this what I was just kind of taught to believe? And so where do people even start, you know? Because I feel like it starts from such a young age, a lot of these beliefs that turn into that.
When I was 18, I and learning how to read, my mom asked me before I turned 19, what do you want for your birthday for Christmas? I was born on Thanksgiving Day. And I said, well, Mom, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth, the greatest writings that have ever been created by the greatest minds who ever lived. She said, you sure you don't want a t-shirt?
Oh, I love
And I
that.
said, no, Mom. And my mom contacted her brother, who was a professor at MIT. He was a very bright guy named, we called him Uncle Ralph. And as a gift, I don't know how he came about it, but he sent two giant 6 by 6 by 6 foot wooden crates on a flatbed truck to my home, my parents' home. And they crane lifted off and put these big crates on the ground. And I went out with a crowbar and opened them up and carried thousands of books into my room. I had this little yoga mat, no, not mat, but sheet or whatever in front of the window. And my room got filled with thousands of books. And I started to go to work. And one of the books was a very insightful book, The Principles of Quantum Mechanics by Paul Dirac. And in there, he said, it's not that we don't know so much, it's that we know so much that isn't so. We're bombarded by misinformation.
Mhm.
We could all see it during COVID. I think everybody got to be awakened to how easy that goes down in society,
Yep.
and that we are taught many times moral hypocrisies. And let me address that. I know that's probably challenging to some people, but I'm going to do it. Your mother says, now be nice, don't be mean. Be kind, don't be cruel. Be peaceful, don't be wrathful. Start fighting, stop fighting. Be generous, don't be stingy. She tells you to be one sided. And in Buddhism, there's a statement the desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is a source of human suffering. And I'm not a Buddhist, but I just extract from every philosophical or theological or scientific thing I can get my hand on. And we're taught how to be one sided and therefore try to get rid of half of ourselves.
Mhm.
Normal behavior, we're trying to get rid of. And then what happens is the moral hypocrisy is mom then demands from dad, is ungrateful, criticizes, wants money or something. She's passing down something that she's been told that is not even obtainable
Mhm.
without even questioning it. It's not that we don't know much, it's we know much so much that isn't so. So we're passing down traditional, conventional, normative, deontological ethics that we've never even questioned, that are not even sustainable in situational ethics. And because of that, we label things. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is positive, this is negative. And then we strive for that which is unobtainable, trying to get a one sided magnet or one sided coin. And then the other side we're trying to get rid of. So we're striving for that which is really unobtainable, a one sided magnet, and trying to get rid of the other pole. Carl Jung called it the shadow that keeps chasing around and following you because you're trying to get rid of half of it. So what that happens now is now we divide things into prey and predator, good and bad, positive, negative. The moment we divide that which is indivisible and label that which is unlabelable and polarize the unpolarizables and separate the inseparables and name these ineffable things, we set ourselves up for labeling something as prey or predator and the fear of loss of this and the fear of gain of this, and we add to our stress. We have no resilience, no adaptability. I wrote a book called The Resilient Mind, another one called Emotional on Essentials of Emotional Intelligence on how to transcend that. And we are just indoctrinated by that which is easy to control people to keep them disempowered. The guilt producing control business to make you feel guilty trying for that which you can't obtain. because you're easy to control when you do that. You're altruistically sacrifice yourself as a drone in the herd to fit in and to be governed instead of think for yourself. I've asked people around the world, millions of people, how many of you want to make a difference? Every hand goes up. Even in a prison, Krugersdorp prison, maximum security prison, 1,000 orange uniform people that had 25 to maximum, security life sentences, they still want to make a difference. But you can't make a difference fitting into that herd instinct and trying to be one-sided. You make a difference by standing out, and you'll probably be ridiculed, violently opposed until you become self-evident as some innovator that's created a new model of thinking. So most people are living in their amygdala. They're just responding out of these polarities. And if you give them the rules of this is right and this is wrong, they good following it. They're little followers, but they don't think for themselves and they don't stand out and realize that that's the pathway of mediocrity and conformity. Ernest Becker, in his Denial of Death text, a Pulitzer Prize winning text, said something quite beautiful. He said, because of our anxiety of death by our animal nature, our fear of mortality, we create a fantasy through dissociation, kind of a freeze response. And we create two forms of paths of immortality to survive, a collective path or an individual path. The collective path is fitting in for fear of banishment, fear of rejection, and we don't want to, so we just want to follow what's happening. And that's where we get into the moral hypocrisy. So we're just ruled by the unthinking, the borrowed visionaries, we call it. But the individual path is the individual that's left a mark in the world. They're the ones that stood up against the illusions and the hallucinations that most people are run their life by. And they have the courage to live by the heart. Coronary, cura means heart. They have the heartfulness. And because if we have a balanced, natural, neutral view, our heart opens. Anytime we have an imbalanced judgment, our heart closes. Anytime we balance it and have equanimity in the mind and equity between ourselves and others, the heart opens. We have the courage to walk an unborrowed pathway, as Ayn Rand described, and liberate ourselves from the judgments that keep us intrusively thinking and, in a sense, impulsing and instincting and creating an autonomic symptoms. And the symptoms are there to try to guide us to our authentic state, trying to guide us back to equanimity, try to guide us back to living by priority where we have objectives, not fantasies. So our physiology, I'm even cancer in its last ditch effort is a mechanism to try to guide people to authenticity. And I'm mapping out how cells respond under stress. First of all, what stress is. There's only two forms of stress: the perception of loss of that which you seek, the perception of gain of that which you try to avoid because of the polarities. And what that does, it creates these autonomic responses and creates the cell regression processes and reactivates through transpositions genetic expressions of earlier embryological and phylogenetic expressions of genes. And I've got this thing mapped out down to the signal molecules, the timing of it, how the body does it. We're creating these illnesses. And there's no doubt that our environment and our toxins and our environments have a play. They're one of the stresses. But our perceptions of those environments are even more significant. Because if I took your hand and put it on a table and hit it with a hammer, you go, "What? Oh, God, crazy, you mean person." But if I told you I'm going to have you reach 100, no, 1 billion people on your podcast, give you $1 billion cash so you could reach whoever you want with your podcast, the home of your dreams without taxation or something. If I said enough benefits there, it said all you have to do is get your thumb slammed and you get it all. You put your thumb on the table and go, it's not the slamming, it's the associations, expectations, perceptions of that slam and what goes with it in our mind that makes our cytokine responses and our autonomic responses. So our whole world is about blaming things on the outside and looking for saviors on the outside to rescue us. And so we blame the viruses and the bacteria and we look for the magic bullet. That whole model has been discussed for centuries. in the Gnidian school of Greek versus the Cone school of Greece, where they said it's an inside job. It's about the power inside us, perception. William James said the greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. So I'm interested in giving people their power back instead of giving them this, I'm a victim of this thing. People actually think that events are stressful. No, it's not the events. It's the perceptions, the expectations, and associations of those events that you have labeled a stress response through your normal autonomics, which are trying to guide you back to seeing things as they actually are, not as what you misinterpreted because of the misinformation you were trained by.
Oh, I don't even want to interrupt you because you have so much knowledge and wisdom, and everything you're saying is just I have goosebumps. But I love the analogy of the hammer and hitting your hand or hitting your thumb. That's a perfect analogy. And when you said, like the symptoms are not the bad thing, it's almost like it's just trying to bring awareness to something
Helping you
out of
become enlightened.
balance.
It's helping you become enlightened. In information theory from MIT, Claude Shannon, who built on that, said that entropy was missing information. The tendency to go from order to disorder is missing information. And the tendency to go from disorder to order is reclaiming information. And Erwin Schrödinger, in a book in 1944 called What is Life, talked about the uh, negative entropy, the what is life. He has a book called What is Life. And this information, if you think about it this way, when you judge somebody and you infatuate with them, let's say, you just meet them, you got a fatal attraction. You're blind to the downsides and you're aware and conscious of the upsides, but unconscious of the downsides initially.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you think, oh my God, I met my soulmate, right? We had the same number of eyes, same number of ribs, same number of teeth, same number of arms. Must be soulmates. So we're concentrating on the similarities instead of the differences. We're not seeing the downsides. Our intuition is whispering, don't rush this, don't be gullible, be cautious, don't go too quick, don't make love with them for 15 minutes at least, that kind of stuff. It's trying to whisper to you, your intuition, which is a homeostatic mechanism, brain's trying to whisper to you, but you're not listening to it. You're letting your impulse rule you.
Hmm.
And now you're unconscious. That unconscious is another name for the missing information. The unconscious is asleep, unaware, in the dark. So if you don't know how to ask questions to make you conscious of what you're unconscious of and wake you up, make you see, go into the light, be awakened, enlightened, if you will, then you're going to let your impulse override your intuition. And Aristotle in his time said, warn about the affections because they're misleading. They're not what's actually there. They're just what you perceive what's there at the time. And that's based on your programming. So if you're infatuated and you're unconscious the other way, and if I ask you, what are the downsides of this person? You don't want to hear it because you like that dopamine fix. You like that enkephalons and oxytocin high and serotonin rush. You don't want to hear about those negatives because you want to live in the fantasy. And that fantasy changes your physiology. It's giving you symptoms and you're ignoring them. It's trying to let you know that you have an incomplete awareness. The same if you resent somebody and you're going, that's a man, I despise that person. Now you're unconscious of the upsides. That person's married to somebody, has kids and has a family. They think he's great, but you're now resenting him. And you're unconscious of the upsides. So anytime you judge somebody, you're dividing your awareness, your full conscious into conscious and unconscious halves. The conscious unconscious halves activate the amygdala, the hippocampus, the entorhinal complex, the parahippocampal area. These areas gather data on where and when and what and content, context to protect you from starving or being eaten because it's going to out prey or predator in your mind. And whenever you do that, you're going to create symptoms to let you know that you're not seeing what's actually there and you're not having the foresight to see the other side of the equation. You're missing information. Therefore, you're living with entropy. And entropy is the arrow of time of aging. So our symptoms are letting us know we're not seeing the whole, we're missing information, we're aging and undergoing entropy. And our physiology is very wise. It tells us amazingly. And but the thing is nobody studies applied physiology. That's one of the things I'm going to be doing these next 5 days. Is we're going to go through each cell of the body, and we're going to go through the autonomic nervous system, look at the receptors, what our perceptions and how it affects them, how it affects that cell, what enzymes are altered, what organelles are altered, what the DNA does, how it regresses, the cell danger zones, how cytokines are born. I mean, we're going to go through each of those and map out how and why that symptom shows up. And then they go, oh, and it gives them their power back because they realize I have control over my perception, decisions, and actions. I don't have control over the environment, but I have control over my perception, decisions, and actions. So people get anxious because they are trying to prevent something they have no control over. But
Right.
if you can go through and understand that you have control of your perception, decisions, and actions, you can change that perception. And I do that every week. I train people on that in my Demartini method and my breakthrough experience. I train people, thousands of 200,000 people on how to change perceptions that are stressful and how to be grateful.
Yeah, you mentioned like when you judge someone, and I always look at it as what you're judging or the thing that irritates you in someone else is usually the thing you refuse
Yeah,
to see in yourself. And so it's almost like there's that symptom that's trying to tell you something, but we
yes,
ignore it.
that's it. Well, the finger points out, the three back.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just did a podcast on the minimalist show. And we addressed that. I learned about 43 years ago that many times the things I would tell people and emphasize to people, as Chomsky said, you're not talking to them, you're talking also to you. Language wasn't just for one person, it was for you too. You're emphasizing to them what you need to hear kind of times.
Yeah.
So I decided instead of having to wait for people to push my buttons, right? In the old saying, it's really your buttons. They're just letting you know what you're not loving in yourself. I went ahead and went to the Oxford English Dictionary, the largest dictionary I could find. And I went through page by page neurotically and underlined every behavioral trait of a human being that I could find. I found 4,628 traits. There's a guy named Gordon Allport that did it 35 years earlier that found 4,000 then, but the vocabulary has probably grown since then. And I went through and I went out on the margin and I wrote out who do I know that displays that trait to the fullest, the most extreme. And I wrote their little name, abbreviated, really tiny. And then I went by and I labeled the trait. I put a plus or a minus next to it. Do I think that's a positive trait or a negative trait because of my programming, the moral
Mhm.
programming? And then I go and where do I do it? When do I do it? To whom do I do it to? And who perceives me that way? And I kept listing where, when, who, where, when, who, where, when, who, until I owned that trait 100% as much as the most extreme person that pushed my buttons. And I went through 4,628 traits. And if I saw that was labeled positive, I then asked, what are the downsides of that trait? Because I'm blind. And if I thought it was negative, what are the upsides? Because really, every trait's got both sides. You could get a date a guy and you think, well, he's so intelligent, but then he argues with you. Or he's so good looking, but every woman's after him. There's always a upside and a downside to everything that happens. So when we don't see but one side, we're blind. We're ignorant. That's ignorance. We're ignoring the information that's there, but we're just not looking at it. We're biased. So I went through there to 4,628 traits and found I had them all. What I noticed is when I saw people, I was now more aware of where I did the same thing, and it stopped me from impulsively or instinctively seeking or avoiding them. And I was more governed. I was more in my executive center. My physiology was more stable. My emotions were more stable. I had more self governance, and I didn't react or label people as much because I realized that what I was pointing my finger at was me. And if I labeled it negative, I was resenting them because they were reminding me of it. And I was dissociating and going into pride and being too proud to admit I do that and hiding from myself with deflective awareness. I was having dismemberment and disownment of parts and not whole. Or I was infatuated and too humble to admit it. But when I did that exercise, I was more easily able to see whatever I saw in others inside me, and it stabilized me. And it was drastically noticeable as I was going through these things, the impact it was having in my life. So fulfillment is filling full the mind of all the parts that are empty. And all the parts that are empty are all the parts we're too proud or too humble to admit we see in others, but we don't see in ourselves. Those disowned parts are the voids that drive our values, and our values are trying to help us find fulfillment, which is owning all the parts. So when you finally love and appreciate and don't put people in pedestals or pits, you liberate yourself from the bondage of those things that have intrusive thoughts that occupy space and time in your amygdala and the hippocampus and keep you in bondage with insomnia and eating disorders and symptomatology. It's all those symptoms, if they're really reclaimed, the ownership of the parts. Your homeostasis is amazing. Your neutrality, your resilience, your adaptability. Stress is the inability to adapt to a changing environment. We're constantly changing. Anytime we're changing, we're going to fear the loss of that which we have a positive attachment to and fear the gain of the things we have a negative attachment to. Our judgments are our stresses, and those come from those moral hypocrisies. And so I'm trying to, I wrote a textbook on morality to try to educate my students on all the different theories of morality from the amygdala up to the executive center and from absolute polarities to relative situational ethics. So they have adaptability to it. So they don't get trapped in a local tribal bias mentality, which adds to the stresses and diseases in the world.
I feel like this is so eye-opening because it really gets to the root of something that I think every single person is conditioned with in our society. And it all goes back to like, well, you have to be a good little girl or a good little boy, and you don't want to upset, your mom or your dad or God or your friends or whatever. And there's all this guilt and shame around things that as human beings we all have. Like you said, where there's good, there's bad. We all have these polarities, but we've just been so
And
conditioned to like
the
we can't
soul,
talk about that, you
the
know?
soul, the state of unconditional love sees neither.
Mm,
It
oh.
transcends it. It's, you know, a lot of people subordinate to a tribal mentality without thinking. And I was on a movie, oh my God, with a whole bunch of people many years ago on theology. Did God make man? Did man make God? Kind of thing. And I don't mean to be sacrilegious because that's not my intention. I've studied every 3,000 different religions and written all kinds of things about it. But if all the Christians or all the Jews or all the Muslims died, what would happen to their God?
Mm.
And um, if we stop, we have a tiny planet. It's about 86,400 seconds in a day in its movement. We divide it up into seconds. If we're sitting there in a lotus position as a guru or something, thinking we have all enlightenment, and we're going around on a hamster cage around the earth as we do it, um, I am aware, I'm all enlightened, right? This kind of illusion. Um, from the sun, which is 93 million miles, give or take, one astronomical unit away from the earth, we're non-discernible. We have to have a telescope from the sun to see the earth. So it's an insignificant infinitesimal. From the Virgo cluster, or even the local cluster, the Virgo cluster, or the center of the Milky Way, 26,000 light years, 27,000 light years to the Milky Way, we can't even see our solar system. It's indiscernible. To the Virgo cluster, our Milky Way is a star. To the Laniakea supercluster, it's non-discernible. The entire cluster is not, the whole Milky Way, none of that's even visible. In the cosmic web, which is plasma filaments in every direction, as far as we can imagine and observe, uh, this speck of our awareness and our deities are pretty insignificant. So we get trapped. And instead of living in holy curiosity and continually to uh, realize that we are an infinitesimal in awareness and what we don't know is an infinite, and that to continue to live with holy curiosity, expanding our awareness, we get trapped because we don't want to think of those such abstract infinities. It's overwhelming to us. So we just stop at some point, go, that's what it is, and travel in the world of dogma, you might say. And then we get caught in the moral awareness of that structure. And instead of broadening our mind into a more universal language, which may be mathematics, instead of the 7,000 languages that are local, we have the mathematics, which is universal and probably universal if we ever discovered life somewhere else. I would rather study the abstractions, the highest level of abstraction, which is the highest level of brain function, and reflective awareness, the symmetry, proportion, and order, as Plato described in Meno, and explore the deepest mysteries with awe and inspiration, and let my tears of gratitude guide my journey with an inspiration and awe of the magnificent universe, than to be caught in a very trivial, black and white, dogmatic, tribal, local, uh, geocentric, anthropomorphic, patternicity, pareidolia, schizophrenic, dissociated state of thinking.
You know, it's wild because it's like the more you learn and the more you know, the more you realize we don't know anything.
That's the
And
humbling part.
yeah, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning, and this guy was talking kind of about that, and he said there's so many things that we think we know, we just take it for granted because we created a word for it. And it's interesting because you're talking about labels and language, and it, in a way, it does limit us. He used the example of hallucinations. He's like, people just be like, oh, it was just a hallucination. And he's like, people don't realize we have no idea exactly what's happening when you hallucinate. And that's just one of many, many, many ideas that, you just take for granted. You think, oh, a scientist figured that out a long time ago and it just is what it is. But really, we have no idea. We know we know there's more that we don't know than what we do know, and that can be applied to just about any area of life. And it's just interesting because I think a lot of these labels, like you were saying, it can have the opposite effect of truly knowing and understanding.
It can stop us in our natural yearning to know, our
Yes,
pathway of gnosis.
well
You know,
said.
uh, Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, 2,000, almost 600 years ago, uh, said that there was a hidden order in the apparent chaos that we live in. And he called it the unity of opposites and the logos, which is the rational order of the universe. No scientist would even pursue science to try to find the laws of the universe if it did not believe that there was some sort of rational order in the universe. It'd be pointless to search. If it was purely random, the whole thing was purely random, there'd be no point in even looking. This, every time we have a glimpse of something that we think is a law of the universe, we try to add them together inductively and try to make a more general law and try to find the laws of the universe. And the pursuit of that has been going on for thousands of years. It started out as a kind of an animistic pursuit, theological, and eventually polytheistic, and eventually theistic, and eventually mythological, and then eventually philosophical, and eventually the scientific, and then the mathematical, and it just keeps getting more abstract and more aware. And the brain is developing from the amygdala all the way into the myelinated executive center as we evolve this. And so our awareness and our language, as it becomes more complex, the more fundamental and more prejudiced and more radical the individual, usually the lower the vocabulary and the more limited the thinking process. So there is a growth in vocabulary, forever greater refinement and more distinctions as we go, but there's no end to it. I mean, so whatever we know, um, some don't believe that we can ever get to an objective truth. We can just approximate it, although we can have maybe a glimpse of it and have a moment of pure reflective awareness and true intimacy with the laws of the universe. We have gradations of awareness, and some are very dedicated to the pursuit, and they're usually ridiculed by those that have already boxed in the thing. And this is the answer. Don't give me more. Don't fool me with the facts. Just let me just believe this. And Osho did a thing back in the 70s, uh, and he was asked, "Do you believe in certain things?" And he says, "I don't spend my time on belief. I'm only interested in what I know
Mm.
and building upon what I know. You know, you can believe in something that's abstract, but I'd rather start with we know. We know there's a mountain. We know the laws of gravity now. Or there's certain things we know, and let's build on what we know. Start with what we know and let what we know grow instead of speculating on something that we don't know. Not that that's not necessary for the next pursuit, but we don't want to claim we know something we don't know.
Yeah.
Start with what we know and build on what we know. And that's the whole purpose of using your reasoning and not letting your fantasies build things in the sky, if you will. But I'm a firm believer. I was flying from San Francisco to Paris to do a presentation in Paris, and I was planning on sleeping on the plane. But Vera Luth and Carl, um, oh God, his name, I don't think of his last name, minute, who are two of the greatest physicists, were on the plane sitting next to me. And coming out of Stanford, getting ready to go to Geneva for particle acceleration, Carl Brown, pardon me, and his wife. These are two of the greatest physicists. I mean, they were like the top of the end. And I got to chat with him for 9 hours. Well, she fell out about 5.5, but he stayed all 9. And we went on. I've studied particle theories and I've been fascinated by it. So we just went right down the thing, got into astronomy and astrophysics and mathematics. We went everywhere. And there we're living at the cutting edge of what was known and then going into theoretical physics to try to anticipate what we can research to try to find more to know. I love that part. But the second we said, well, that's it, and that's it, and here's what you memorize and this, and if
Right.
it's true, fantastic, we know it. We can demonstrate it. But if it's not, it can mislead us. And then we can put, if you follow this belief, it's good. And if you don't, it's bad. And you just start up the moral structures again. And now you're back into symptomatology. And the illnesses and symptoms are letting us know we're limiting our awareness to what we've realized phenomenologically instead of transcending it and pursuing what's actually there.
Do you have any simple, just something easy, like if someone's listening right now, a technique or some way that they can sort of tune in to these symptoms and sort of backtrack and kind of figure out what is leading to what? Just
Well,
something like, that they can do while they're sitting in their car listening.
yeah. Um, I'll start with the very simple one we'll build. Most people have had a difficult sleeping somewhere in their life at night, sort of an insomnia state. Most. If you look really carefully, your brain is ruminating on something. You could meet somebody that you're highly infatuated with, and you could ruminate on the fantasies of what's going to happen with that person. Or you can meet something you highly resent and ruminate on all the nightmares that you just thought happened, past or future. So anytime you go into past and future and you polarize your perceptions, your brain is now under an alert for fear of loss of something you seek or fear of gain of something you're trying to avoid. So it doesn't want to go to sleep because you're going to miss out on eating or you're going to miss out on something eating you. So the symptoms of insomnia, if I go and I take anybody with insomnia and itemize the content of their mind that's ruminating on, there's an imbalance ratio perception. It's either something they're seeking or avoiding there. I can ask a set of questions. And if it's a negative, I find out what's the benefit and ask them the benefits of that thing that they fear happening. How would it benefit them? Never ask that question because they're so programmed that that's a bad thing. No, it's not. It's a thing. It's an experience. Now, find out the question because the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask questions that allow you to see both sides of things, you're untouched by those things of the outer world. You're let the inner world rule you, and your brain goes to bed. And so the symptoms of the insomnia are letting you know that you have stored a lopsided perception, and it's time to ask what your intuition is constantly trying to do, a question that makes you reveal the unconscious to liberate yourself. And the moment you ask the question, what are the downsides to the girl that you're fantasizing or guy you're fantasizing about? And once you do, you go, oh, I don't need to minimize myself to them. I'm not living in the wet dream of the fantasy. I'm now grounded and I go to sleep and we'll deal with it tomorrow and talk to the guy. Now I realize I'm equal to him. He's not on my pedestal or on the pedestal. And the same thing in the pit. So the symptoms is letting you know the questions to ask because you have an imbalanced ratio. Now, you can also do it another way. You can go into a physiology book and you can ask, what are my symptoms? And then go and ask, what cells are creating those symptoms on AI? AI is great for this. And then you'll realize this cell is secreting this thing and you're getting this response. You could then go to what side of the autonomics is generating that parasympathetic, sympathetic, prey, predator. And then you now ask, what are the downsides to the thing that you're thinking? And what are the upsides to what you're thinking again? Because I can take almost anybody that's got hypertension. I had a guy who had extreme hypertension. I mean, he was a time bomb. His doctor said, you're going to stroke. You're going to have a heart attack. He was secretly seeing another girl. Well, not secretly. He was seeing another girl. His wife was aware of it. He had a wife of many years, two kids, two daughters. And he didn't want to divorce her because he had about $12 million saved. And if he divorces, it goes to six, and she gets half. And he doesn't have the daughters close to him. But the wife has been focused on the daughters and is not interested in sex anymore and not interested in his career anymore. So he's finding somebody that's interested in sex and a career, and she's giving the amygdala response, and he's infatuated with her a bit, and he's seeing this girl. The wife is knowing it, but doesn't really want to go through a divorce because that's complex and doesn't want to lose the security. He doesn't want to lose his 12 million. He doesn't really want to get divorced and doesn't want to marry the new girl because then he could take it to three because his value on wealth and his work. And so now the girl over here is telling him that he needs to divorce his wife or she's going to go on and trying to bluff him a bit, to try to flinch him. And he's like, his heart attack's almost there because he's going, I don't want to leave this. I don't want to lose my wealth. I don't want to take the risk over here. I just want to get what I'm wanting. And so he comes to me and he said, I'm about to have a heart attack or something here. My heart's racing. I got sympathetic off the chart. I'm fearing the loss of what I want. I'm fearing the gain of what I don't want. How do we do it? So I said, well, if you want me, I can negotiate something. So I first met with his wife and I had a conversation with her. Uh, do you want to, anything you're not willing to do with your mate, you got to be willing to delegate. This lady's coming in and doing the things you're not wanting to do. Do you want to do them or do you want her to do it and consider her an employee working for you?
That's a that's a very interesting perspective.
And she was like going, I like that.
She's
He
like, well,
can,
now it sounds pretty good.
yeah, she can do the stuff over there that I'm not interested in doing. And I'll just keep the stability over here because he's not really going to go anywhere. And so then she negotiated that and she was receptive because she realized that that's better than divorcing. That was because, and it's probably going to play itself out. Hedonic adaptation, this fantasy eventually fades and then it comes back kind of thing. So, and she's now realizing, and I told her, I said, you might want to go out and get yourself in shape again because you let yourself go a bit. You're not taking care of your beauty anymore. And you're not going to compete right now, but you could.
Mhm.
He paid for it too. So she started working out. She went and got those fillers and stuff like that, and got her hair dyed, and did something really smart to try to get a little bit of the attention back. She, the other girl, I sat with her and I said, the very thing you're seeing is going to potentially happen to you. You know that it's going to happen again because hedonic adaptation. Right now, you're the fancy new thing, but you're going to pay the price. And if you get it, you're going to be looking over your shoulder all the time because once you do it, you're going to become like her, and it's going to cycle again. And so I calmed it down. I said, and then the second she found out that he was thinking about the divorce, just even considering it, stalling it out, but thinking about it. She ended up having breast nodules as a strategy, unconscious strategy, in order not to get him to leave, because he's not going to leave if she has cancer suddenly.
Mhm.
He's going to ride it out just in case she dies, and then he gets the money, and then he goes on and he puts a prenup. And it was really interesting watching this whole psychology. So I calmed her down. I said, because you're going to feel, if she ends up with a breast tumor, you're going to feel schmucky in this process. So why don't we just organize a deal where he's with her, he's with you, and we negotiated a deal with 3 days with her, 3 days with her, and a day in a cabin recovering from both. Anyway, they became friends. The older person actually helped her raise the child she had with somebody else before they met. And it was really interesting. They lived literally 3 or 4 blocks away from each other, and they had nice big homes, and he got the homes, but he kept control of the money because he was really good with money management, and made sure that both were taken care of. And he had both. In some cultures, that's not abnormal, but in our culture, that's not. It's immoral in this culture, but not all cultures.
Mhm.
In some cultures, there's many wives or many husbands and stuff like that. So this is the structure that ended up. His blood pressure normalized. I mean, it was almost normal the second
Wow.
that was negotiated. The breast tumors disappeared. The little tumors just disappeared, which they do sometimes. The lady backed off, appreciated the benefit of what she's doing and the risk she was taking, and they just realized that they were getting what they wanted, and they just expanded into more of a bigger family. And it was really quite interesting how it all worked. And his life and his health. Now, he eventually passed away. He passed just about 2 years ago. But he went on another 14 years without heart attacks, nothing else, once we got that negotiated. Now, some people say, well, that's not right. This is what's right, and this is what's right. It's easy to say that when it's not your dynamic, but when it's your dynamic and you're caught with your moral hypocrisies and your moral, you know, situational ethics, which are there, you find yourself all of a sudden going, "Oh, I'm humbled," and you realize that this is his life now. Because if he had to get rid of the girl, he would miss. He felt that he was not going to be complete, and he would resented his wife, and so he was trapped in this thing in his mind. I tried to make him see the downsides of the girl and the upsides of his wife first, and we did. But this girl was now working in his clinic as a doctor and working in his clinic and making him $400,000 a year in profit, which is his highest value. So if he gets rid of that, he's getting rid of the money, and then he ends up resenting the wife. And it's so we just negotiated what we did, and this thing worked out for 14 years. And his health stabilized, their stress levels stopped, their unrealistic expectations stopped, and they took on a bigger view of life and adapted to the dynamic. He was a Gemini, which I thought was interesting. Not that
Yeah.
that normally would be something I would put a value on, but I just thought that was interesting. And the girl that actually had the younger girl had been married and had that child, right? This other child, and didn't want to go through what was going on again, and realized after talking to her that she had done a similar pattern and she was headed for the same thing. And then she would have more of a challenge. And she was thinking she was going to have another child with this guy. And then she stopped and calmed that down. And so it was really quite interesting to watch all of the things that we've never loved and balanced in our mind repeat themselves. The Buddhists call it the karmic wheel, but all it is imbalanced ratios of perceptions, intruding thoughts, and regurgitating in the hippocampus until we eventually see things balanced and love things and move forward. So
Yeah.
that's an example.
Well, and it's an interesting example too because it involved just
Health.
talking about it though, like putting it out in the open. And especially something like that, like in our society, we're taught like, well, you don't talk about that. You don't be honest with, your wife with something like that. But the only way to solve it in that scenario was to be out in the open and talk about it, and instead of letting it be this intrusive thought in your mind that you're just holding on to by yourself.
Well,
So,
he was. an intelligent man. They're all very intelligent individuals that had some high degree of reflective awareness, which was helpful. But our fantasies get in the way with the magnificence of our life.
Hmm.
We compare our lives to fantasies about how it's supposed to be, should be, ought to be, supposed to be. And then when it's not, we're angry.
Yeah.
And instead of actually taking, anytime you compare your current reality to a fantasy about how it ought to be, should be, supposed to be, got to be, all the imperatives, you're not going to appreciate your life because
Hmm.
you're too trapped in the ideals of what it's supposed to be and trying to fix somebody. And everybody wants to be loved for who they are, not for who you are trying to fix them into being.
Right.
That's the reason why the relationships undermine in the first place, is because two people are, well, whenever we're challenged, we go into our amygdala, and our amygdala then makes us go into pride and fantasy. And the pride is that we're right, and the fantasy is that people are supposed to live in our values and they're supposed to be one sided. They're not. I'm
Hmm.
not a nice person. I tell people that. They think, what? I said, no, I'm a human being. I'm an individual, which means undivided being. And you support my values. I'm nice as a pussycat. You challenge my values. I'm mean as a tiger. When I go to an airline, and I used to fly a lot, I'm sailing more than flying now, but when I used to fly a lot of miles, I'd go in and they'd say, "Oh, Dr. Demartini, we have your flight. Here's your ticket, and you have 1,000,000 miles, and so you get upgraded to the captain's area or whatever. Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Nice day. That kind of stuff. Great. Because my values are supported. I'm nice as a pussycat. My endorphins are up. I'm altruistic to them. Thank you. Big hug kiss. Thank you. But if all of a sudden they say, we don't see your ticket. Do you have a confirmation number? That confirmation number, we don't register. Somehow we've got a glitch. Our computer's down. We won't be able to get you on the flight today. Um, and we don't see another flight for a week. So you'll have to get a hotel or something like that. I don't go, I say, can we try again? I start out really kind. Can we try again, please? Take a look again, look for my confirmation because I know it's a confirmation and I've been flying a lot. I've got 1,000,000 miles and then they'll, if they're a duck, you escalate quicker. If they're an eagle, they'll try everything they can to try to help you, right? And you'll be patient. If they finally say there's nothing we can do about it, it's just tough luck, buddy. And here's a voucher for a smoothie or no, a Coca-Cola and a burger or something, and you can stay in this flea-bitten hotel. And I'm self-righteously thinking, well, I deserve better than that, right? I've got this fantasy of who I am. I'm going to say, I want Richard Branson at the front counter now. I can get completely irrational and aggressive and be a friggin' tiger to and if until I find out they're calling the police and realizing that's not working.
Then you're nice again.
Nice again. So I realize that I have all those potentials and capacities inside me, and I stopped trying to get rid of half of me. 42 years ago, I gave up because and I found myself more stable, not trying to get rid of half of me and trying to be only one sided. It's futile, and you want to love yourself for
Hmm.
all of it, the hero, the villain, the saint, the sinner, the nice, the mean, the kind, the cruel, because you can't raise kids without both.
Hmm.
Just
Yeah,
try. Just
that's
try.
true. I have three
Kids
of
are
them.
gonna kids are gonna make sure that you're taken right to that edge.
Hmm.
And you want to just go.
Yeah. Oh, it brings out all the
It
sides
brings
of you,
out all your
parenting, like
disowned
nothing
parts.
else.
The children are expressions. What's interesting is when you are making love and you're infatuated with somebody and you make love, you're epigenetically coding, if you get them pregnant at that time, epigenetically coding the germline
Really?
and the development on the traits that you were blind to during the infatuation to make sure the kids specialize in that to teach you to love the parts you were not willing to love at that moment. So your kids are going to
Oh,
be,
wow.
that's why you're going to tell the kid, you're going to tell the kid, you're just like your father, the things you didn't like about him, because they're going to express the repressions. And
Yeah.
anything you try to run away from, you'll keep running into.
Mhm.
And so you marry your dissonant parts, you procreate your dissonant parts, you attract clients of dissonant parts, employees of dissonant parts to teach you how to love all parts of yourself, to help you become whole and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. And these fantasies, like looking at the people or the relationships that you think are perfect, if you really knew, like if you were communicating on all aspects, you'd realize they're not. They have those
Or that the
qualities too.
perfection, or that the perfection is the whole. See, I'm
Mm,
a believer that I don't think I'm imperfect. I don't think so. I
hmm.
think the perfection of all of us is the wholeness. But we have
Yeah.
been hoodwinked into thinking it's got to be one sided, which is futile.
Yeah.
And so then we think, well, I'm not perfect. And then we're sold a fantasy of somebody who might have been.
Wow. Oh,
So
that
I
just
believe
blew my mind.
the perfection is already there. And we've been hoodwinked into the delusion that somebody else once upon a time that we can't really prove or disprove was that one-sided person, and there is no such thing. Don't be fooled by facades. I tell my students, don't ever be fooled by facades. There's where every hero there's a villain inside, and every villain there's a hero inside. I studied hagiography and hagiology many years ago in my 20s, which is a study of the saints and the biographies of the saints. 20% of them didn't even exist. They're fabricated by the church in order to convert people from other faiths and beliefs.
Mhm.
And then most of them were thugs, murderers, thieves, killers that had repented and gone the other extreme, like a smoker going to non smoking, and now they're the other extreme.
Mhm.
And so what became a saint was that which marketed and would sell in the church, not the real individual is not what we think. Just like if you go and study a little bit about some of the even the popes, there's some shady sides on some of the popes, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of scandals there if you go and do your homework. So I don't I respect people for being whole. I don't expect them to be one-sided, which sets me up for betrayal. Betrayal is never what they do to me. Betrayal is what I do to me with my false expectations, expecting them to be one-sided and expecting them to live in my values, not their own values. If
Mhm.
I don't care enough to know what their values are, I'm not going to have a realistic expectation of what to expect. You can expect me to be teaching, researching, and writing and traveling. You can't expect me to be cooking. I haven't cooked since I was 24. You can't expect me to drive a car. I haven't driven a car in 36 years. I delegate anything that's low in my values and I live by what's highest. I spend my day teaching, researching, writing, and traveling. That's it. So if you don't know what my values are and you expect me to live in yours or expect to be one-sided or expect me to not be in mine, I'm going to betray you.
Yeah.
You're gonna label me a betrayer, or I can't trust you. And all this illusion that we do is because we don't understand human behavior. And that's why Dirac said it. So we don't know. So we know so much that isn't so. We're
Yeah.
misinformed all the time.
Well, and asking yourself too, like, what are your values? And are those really your values, or is that what you were told should be your values?
Well,
Because I feel
that's
like
what
we
I
don't
I
do
developed a
that.
method. I developed a method just for that purpose to discern those distinctions.
Oh,
And I've
okay.
got I help people identify the language of injected values from outer authorities, the superegos, as Freud called them,
Mhm.
and I show them the signs of congruency and what true values are. And I've gone through an objective strategy to do that. I've been doing that 48 years. And when I was 23, I asked a question. Why do some people walk their talk and some people limp their life? Why do some people do what they say and others don't? Why do some people flourish, others flounder?
Mhm.
And I realized it was based on their what motivates them extrinsically and intrinsically, which is basically human values. So I devoured every textbook that was available in English on those topic, axiology, the values. There's only 12 at the time. The most important topic only had 12 textbooks in English. And I devoured them and I was not satisfied with what I read. Most of it was how we ought to be instead of how we are and how we should be. And it was about designing a society to function according to the drone mentality instead of the individual creative genius mentality. And Majority of people, that's what they follow and that's what they need, and that's okay. But that's not for everybody. And so I want to know what are the values, not what they ought to be, should be, ought to be, supposed to be, etc. And I went through and I discerned 13 primary criteria and determinants to determine what is an individual's real values. And I've been asking hundreds of thousands of people over these years. Millions of people have gone in. It's on my website for free. drdemartini.com. It's free. Anybody can use it. It's being used. In fact, millions of people have used it. Governments, companies, individuals, organizations, because it discerns about what is real. Because if you go and ask somebody, what are your values? They'll say things like peace, harmony, integrity, truth, bullshit. That's all bullshit. I'm interested in what your life demonstrates. Diogenes, at the time of Socrates, went all over Europe trying to find an honest man, never found an honest man or an honest woman for that matter. And because we're not geared to be honest, we're geared to be honest and dishonest. Stop and think about it. When we perceive things supporting of our values, if we tell the truth and we're going to get our values supported, we'll tell it. But if we think it's going to interfere with something very important to us, we're not. And it's the old situational ethics. If your best friend is maybe gay, and there's a Muslim jihad group out there, and they're taking them and finding gays and putting them on top of a building and making them jump off and killing them because it's not what they're told by the Quran or something. And they come in and they say, "Is your buddy here?" And he's in the other room, and you know what they're about to do. You're now in a situational ethics. Under deontological ethics, I have to tell the truth because that's what's good. My buddy's up there, and now he's going to get killed. Uh, Under utilitarian consequentialism, whatever the best consequence is in your perception, you're going to tell. So if you lie, you save his life and you stop their rampaging through people who have different sexual, needs or whatever. And so now you're sitting in a situational ethics. So which one's right or wrong? Both of those are two models of ethics that you could follow, and you could be ontologically oriented, deontologically oriented, where you follow the duty of the rules, the conformist, the right and wrong, the black and white, or you get a little bit more gray and you go, well, in this situation, I think I'd rather lie and take the risk. So we have to have both in order to survive our life. And you're going to say something to your kids. You're going to tell them, we're going to go to the store and we're going to go to the mall, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going to go swimming or whatever. And then something came up way more important in your priority list, and then you didn't get to do it. And they think, well, my mom's lying all the time. No, she's juggling all the variables that she's facing in a day, and she may go and tell them, this has come up. I really anticipate it. We're going to have to reschedule that. But they're going to see, well, mommy lied to us again. So
Yeah.
these are situational ethics that are inevitable, that nobody can escape. And going through life and thinking you're going to be one-sided all the time is futile. I mean, if your spouse asks, how do I look right now? And you're late, you want to get going and they don't look so great, you're going to say, looks great, honey, let's go.
Right.
These kind of things. Or liar, and Jim Carrey in the elevator
Yeah.
with the woman with the big boobs, right? So these are things that we all face. I'm not interested in black and whiting it,
Mhm.
because you're guaranteed to create an impossibility for people. I'm interested in putting reason into the situation, putting all the variables on the thing, looking at what they're facing, trying to comprehend what they're facing, like the gentleman that had the two women, because I've seen it where it's the other way around. A woman has two men. I've
Mhm.
seen both of them, and I've seen why they're doing it, and I comprehend it. And instead of putting it into a box, this is bad or good, this is the situation they're facing. I had a gentleman in London who had erectile dysfunction. Was an older gentleman married to a younger woman, and he openly told his wife that, I don't want you to be sitting here and not having I can have oral sex, I can have other forms of sex, but I'm not able to have the other, and I can use artificial mechanisms and things, but I want you to have the freedom to do what you need to do. And she had a special guide for that purpose. And it became a discussion in the room. And as you would expect, both sides of the equation. Some were really angry and how you do that because they were frightened about their husband doing that and their wife doing that. And then there were others that were going, oh, and they were in a situation where they could comprehend how that might be a strategy to survive the dynamic, to keep the marriage going. And so I had a whole spectrum, and we had a great discussion on the whole spectrum over a real case of a real life. And they were together for 23 years, and 10 of that was that way. And they were still loving each other and they held hands. But that was their dynamic. So I go, okay, that's not the ideal of what society says. And that's not what you may say my values are, but that's what's facing them and that's what they're dealing with. And so I like to help navigate people so they can love themselves in those situations and look at options and possibilities in case there are other options.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. See, and again, it's all perspective, right? It's all,
All perception and expectation and associations you have.
yeah. Okay, I have to ask you kind of a random question before we go, but you said you got thousands of books, the best, greatest teachings in the world. Is there one book that is your favorite or that just stood out to you among all the others, or like a handful of books, or one that you could recommend that people like everyone should read this?
Well, I don't use shoulds because that's an imperative that now I'm the authority and now they have to follow my
Mm,
instruction that way. I don't find that productive. But I did find a 2 volume set of book. Well, it's part of a series called The Great Books of the Western World by Britannica
okay.
and the Great Ideas series. And the first 2 volumes is called Syntopican Volumes 1 and 2 by Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler. And I believe that those 2 volumes, they're about 900 pages each, uh, are a good PhD on life.
Mm, okay.
I think that the principles have been distilled down from some of the greatest minds in the Western world over the last 2,700 years. Uh, and they've written it beautifully and summarized it into principles that, and laws, you might say, or yeah, laws or principles about the universe and life. And I think going through that is a great education. And it's done in 10 to 12 page units with a topic. So you could just tackle one at a time and just take your time through the book. And I really believe that it's an education. And those 2 books are the ones I would recommend for somebody to just start to expand their awareness a bit
Hmm.
and to be start to be aware of the laws that govern human behavior a bit more. I started those in my 20s and I reread them again. I still have them on my computer and I sometimes go through them again. And they're really worthy of the pursuit.
Well, thank you for that. I'm gonna get that. And I like that you can go and take it like a few pages at a time or go back to it.
Yeah,
That's
you
always
can you
helpful.
can have a dictionary next to you if you need to look up any things because but it's a real good education. It's a quality education.
Great.
I was having a speech in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was an evening speech, and I was with the senator there, and we were having dinner together, and he was a really bright guy, and I asked him, "Tell me how you were able to win the election, and what do you think was the keys to your winning this election, and how did you do it?" And he said, "I went door to door, and I slept very little, and I met thousands and thousands of people, and found out what their needs are, and wrote them down, and thought of plans of what I could do to help solve real people's problems." I didn't have the money for marketing and TV and all that to reach more people more efficiently. But I eventually got on some TV opportunities because of people helping me along the way. And I said, "So what is the greatest knowledge that you filled your mind with that's doing it?" And he said, "My favorite books are Syntopican." And I got a little teary eyed. I said, "Well, those are ones I usually recommend too." He said, "Those 2 books have been a real gold mine for me to understand life and humans."
Mm. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I feel like you've just given so much wisdom and knowledge. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything. And maybe you can tell everybody where they can find you so they can dive deeper. What do you have going on right now?
I'm I just spend my day teaching, researching, and writing, and so I'm doing podcasts and webinars and presentations every day. But if they would like to, just go to drdemartini.com, DRDEMARTINI.com, and look up determine your values, value determination process. Take 30 minutes of your time and make a commitment to be as honest as you can be aware and answer the questions, the 13 questions in there. I feel it will be eye opening. You'll see why you create what you create if you do. And then maybe read a little bit about it. On my website is thousands of interviews. I've done about 9,000 interviews. There's hundreds and hundreds of interviews in there, and all different types. And look for the topics that intrigue somebody and just take advantage of it. It's an educational journey. And there's also products on there, and there's also seminars if you want to, if those are interesting. If you find value out of that, keep probing. But yeah, that's the best thing I can tell people. Just try that.
Okay. Well, I'll link that in the show notes. I'm actually going to go do that when we get off the call here. So thank you so much again for your time and for coming on. And you're welcome back anytime in the future.
Anytime you want to, you need somebody to rap a bit, let's just let us know.
Awesome. Okay, great. And thank you to everyone tuning in. And I'll see you back here in the next episode.